This is HOA clapback. The salt bucket was not optional today. You are not special. You are just next on the list. Diane Hall yelled that my walkway had a thin, icy glaze and she was filming for the record, and the fine would hit today unless I corrected it in front of witnesses. I stood on my own front step in Ann Arbor, Michigan, holding my thermos mug with steam curling into the freezing fog, and watched her wave her phone like she was documenting a war crime. She wore a purple parka with the hood up and pink earmuffs, and she had a handheld label maker clipped to her belt like a cop carries a taser. The fog made everything look haunted, and the compacted slush on my shovel was still smoking from the salt I had just thrown down 10 minutes ago. She said the Willow Ridge HOA board gave me until noon to fix it, or the fine would be $250 in climbing. I said I salted it twice already, and the temperature was 12 degrees and nothing was melting. She said that was not her problem, that was my problem, and she had 3 other properties to document before lunch. I asked her who the witnesses were. She pointed at a gate technician with a tool bag walking up the sidewalk mid-argument, a guy I knew from the middle school where I work as a custodian. He stopped, looked at both of us, and said he was just here to check a hinge. Diane told him to note the time and the condition of the walkway. He said he was not doing that and kept walking. I work nights cleaning classrooms and fixing broken lockers, so I know everyone in town, and I know when someone is running a hustle. Diane Hall runs the fines and enforcement coordinator role for Willow Ridge HOA, like it is a private police force with no authority, and she brags about collections at every board meeting. The neighborhood is a place where everything requires a form, and the form requires another form, and Diane has a label maker that she uses to tag shovels and salt as violations if you leave them on your porch past 8 in the morning. I had been living here 6 months, and I had already seen her ticket 4 driveways for snow piles blocking sight lines that did not block anything. She waved the phone again and said she was going back to her car to file the report unless I got a contractor out here in the next hour. I said I already had a contractor, and he refused to come back because she tried to audit his shovel path last week with a tape measure. She smiled, breath puffing white in the cold, and said that was proof I hired someone who cut corners. I said he quit because she followed him around his truck yelling about angles. She said the board would back her because they were afraid of her, and if I wanted to file a grievance I could do it in writing with 3 copies and a $50 processing fee. I did not mention my evidence yet, because I wanted her to repeat the story first. I had been building an invoice trail for 2 months, tracking every fine she handed out, and cross-referencing the snow removal contractor she kept recommending in the violation notices. His name was on at least 9 different enforcement letters, always as the suggested remedy, and his invoices showed up in HOA budget line items with prices that did not match the services. I had copies, and I had bank records that a city code enforcement officer gave me after I asked him what was actually enforceable under Michigan law. Turns out most of what Diane calls violations are just suggestions, and the fines are only legal if the HOA follows its own hearing process, which she skips half the time. She turned to leave, and I asked her if she filed a notice with the management company yet. She said she did not need to. The board authorized her to issue on-site corrections. I said that was not in the covenant. She said the covenant was updated last year and I missed the meeting. I said I got the minutes and there was no amendment about on-site fines. She stopped walking, turned around, and said I could argue it at the next hearing if I paid the cure fee first. I said there was no cure fee in the rules. She said there was now, and if I wanted proof I could request the updated handbook for $15 plus shipping. That was when I knew she was running this whole thing off the books. The HOA was ignoring my proof and demanding the same thing again in a new format every time I pushed back. And Diane was the enforcer who made sure no one had time to look at the documents. My small business reputation was at risk because the HOA was spreading lies in a neighborhood group chat post painting me as a hazard during a storm, and I needed to shut it down before it got worse. She said I had until noon, and then she walked back to her car. I watched her pull out, and I went inside and started making calls. The city code enforcement officer was my ally, a guy named Marcus who had been dealing with Willow Ridge complaints for 3 years and hated every board member by name. I called him and asked if he could meet me at the clubhouse that afternoon. He said he could, but he needed a reason to be there. I said I had a reason, and it involved an invoice trail showing kickbacks to an HOA vendor and a coordinated harassment push using the management company and the tow vendor together. He said he would be there at 4. I hung up and checked the group chat. Someone posted a photo of my walkway with a caption about negligent homeowners during ice storms. No name, but everyone knew it was my house because the mailbox number was visible. 3 people replied with concern emojis, and 1 person said they were worried about liability. I screenshotted it and added it to my folder. Then I checked my email and saw a notice from the management company saying I had a 24-hour cure deadline that was impossible during a blizzard, and if I did not comply, they would authorize emergency snow removal and bill me. The blizzard was supposed to hit tonight, 6 inches minimum with wind chills below 0. The cure deadline was noon tomorrow, which meant I would need to shovel and salt in the middle of the storm or hire someone who would charge triple. My contractor was out, and the only other company that serviced Willow Ridge was the one Diane kept recommending, the one on the invoice trail. I was not calling them. I grabbed my laptop and started pulling up the invoice trail. I had been tracking the snow removal contractor for 8 weeks, cross-referencing every enforcement letter Diane sent out with the contractor recommendations and the HOA budget reports the management company posted online. The contractor, a guy named Ed who ran a company called Precision Winter Services, showed up in 23 violation notices since December. His average quoted price was $400 for a standard driveway clean, which was twice the going rate. The HOA budget showed 3 payments to Precision Winter Services in January alone, totaling $6,000. But the line items did not specify which properties were serviced. I pulled the meeting minutes and found a note that said the board approved emergency snow removal contracts without homeowner consent, which was legal, but the payments were processed through a reimbursement account that Diane managed. I had the thread, but I needed the knot. Marcus said he could help with that if I got him access to the management company records, but they were locked behind a portal that required board-level login. I did not have that, but I knew someone who did. One of my neighbors, a woman named Angela who sat on the architectural review committee, hated Diane and had been documenting her own grievances for a year. I texted her and asked if she could pull the reimbursement ledger. She said she could, but it would take until tonight. I said tonight was fine, and I went back outside to deal with the walkway. The ice was still there, thin and glassy, and the fog was getting thicker. I salted it again, a full bag this time, and then I grabbed the shovel and scraped the compacted slush into a pile by the mailbox. The chunk of slush looked like evidence, so I left it there. Then I went inside and waited. At 2 in the afternoon, Diane came back. She had a clipboard this time, and she was wearing the label maker on her belt like a badge. She walked up to my door and knocked hard enough to rattle the frame. I opened it, and she said the cure deadline was moved up to 4 because the storm was coming early. I said that was not in the notice. She said the notice was amended and I would get the updated version in the mail. I asked her who amended it. She said the board did, in an emergency session this morning. I asked her if the emergency session was on the calendar. She said it did not need to be because it was an emergency. I asked her if she had minutes from the session. She said the minutes would be posted next week. I said I wanted to see the authorization for the amended deadline. She said I could request it in writing with the handbook fee. I said I already paid for the handbook last month. She said that was the old handbook and the new one had updated procedures. I asked her how many times she was going to charge me for the same book. She said as many times as it took for me to follow the rules. She turned the clipboard around and showed me a pre-printed form with checkboxes and a signature line. She said I needed to sign it to acknowledge the amended deadline. I said I was not signing anything without seeing the board authorization. She said that was fine. She would mark it as refusal to comply and the fine would double. I asked her what the fine was for. She said failure to maintain safe egress during adverse weather. I asked her what egress I was blocking. She pointed at the walkway and said the ice was a slip hazard. I said I salted it 3 times. She said her documentation showed otherwise. I did not argue. I took a photo of her clipboard with my phone, making sure the label maker was visible in the frame, and then I closed the door. She yelled through the door that I had until 4 or the tow vendor would be authorized to remove my vehicle for blocking snow removal access. I opened the door again and said my car was in the garage. She said the garage was too close to the curb and it blocked the plow path. I said the garage was 15 feet from the curb. She said the plow path was defined as 20 feet from the center line during adverse weather. I asked her to show me that rule. She said it was in the updated handbook. I said I wanted to see it now. She said she did not carry the handbook in the field. I said that was convenient. She said I was being obstinate and the board would hear about it. I said the board would hear about a lot of things, and I closed the door again. At 3:30, Angela texted me. She said she pulled the reimbursement ledger and it was bad. The ledger showed 9 payments to Precision Winter Services between December and January, but only 3 properties were listed as recipients, and all 3 were board members. The rest of the payments were coded as general maintenance with no address attached. The total was $18,000, and none of it matched the line items in the public budget. She said she was sending me the file now, and I needed to move fast because Diane was already asking the management company to lock down the portal after hours. I downloaded the file and opened it. The payments were clean, but the coding was sloppy. 3 invoices had Ed's signature, but the service dates did not match the snow events. 1 invoice was dated December 8th, but Ann Arbor did not get snow until December 15th. Another invoice was for a property that did not exist in Willow Ridge. The 3rd invoice had a line item for equipment rental, but Ed did not rent equipment. He owned his trucks outright. I cross-referenced the invoices with the enforcement letters, and the pattern was clear. Every time Diane issued a violation, the homeowner was told to hire Precision Winter Services or face escalating fines. Most people paid the fine instead, and the money went into the reimbursement account. Then the board paid Ed out of the account for services he never performed, and Diane got a cut. I had the knot. Marcus called me at 3:45 and said he was outside the clubhouse. I grabbed my laptop, printed the ledger and the invoices, and drove over. The clubhouse was a small building at the front of the neighborhood, a place where everything required a form and the form required another form, and it smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. Marcus was waiting in the parking lot with his city truck, and he had a folder under his arm. I handed him my folder, and he flipped through it. He said it was enough for a management audit that exposes the pattern, but I needed to get it in front of the board and the homeowners at the same time or Diane would bury it. I said I had a plan. The board meeting was tomorrow night at 7, and the agenda was already posted. There was a line item for winter safety enforcement review, which meant Diane would be presenting her violation reports and asking for expanded authority. I could request public comment time and present the evidence during her presentation, but I needed witnesses in the room to make it stick. Marcus said he would be there, and Angela said she would bring 2 other committee members who were tired of Diane. I said I needed more than that. He said I should post in the group chat and invite everyone who got hit with a snow fine this winter. I said that would tip off Diane. He said let it tip her off. It would make her nervous and sloppy. I went home and posted in the group chat. I said I was requesting public comment at the board meeting to discuss winter enforcement policies, and I encouraged anyone with concerns to attend. I did not mention the invoices. I hit send and waited. The group chat exploded. 6 people replied in the first 10 minutes, all asking what I had. I said I would present it at the meeting. Diane replied and said public comment was limited to 3 minutes per homeowner, and I needed to submit my topic in advance for board approval. I said public comment was a right under the bylaws and I did not need approval. She said the bylaws were updated, and I was citing the old version. I said I had the current bylaws and there was no approval requirement. She said she would check with the management company and get back to me. She did not get back to me. Instead, I got an email from the management company at 5:30 saying my public comment request was denied because the topic was under active enforcement and discussing it publicly would interfere with due process. I replied and said due process required a hearing, and I had not been offered one. They said the hearing was scheduled for next week and I would receive formal notice in the mail. I said I wanted the hearing moved to the board meeting so the homeowners could hear the evidence. They said that was not possible and the hearing would be conducted by an independent arbitrator. I forwarded the email to Marcus and Angela. Marcus said the management company was covering for Diane, and we needed to force the issue. Angela said the only way to do that was to show up at the meeting and present during the open forum before Diane could shut it down. I said the open forum was at the beginning of the meeting, and Diane would have security remove me if I went off topic. Marcus said then I needed to stay on topic and frame the invoices as a winter safety concern, not a financial audit. At 6, the blizzard started. The wind picked up and the snow came down heavy and wet, the kind that sticks to everything and makes the roads slick in minutes. I went outside and salted the walkway again, even though I knew it would not matter by morning. The snow was already piling up on the driveway, and the plow had not come through yet. I shoveled the front step and cleared the mailbox, and then I went back inside and checked the group chat. 2 more people said they were coming to the meeting, and 1 person posted a photo of a tow truck parked in front of their house with a note that said unauthorized vehicle removal, authorized by Willow Ridge HOA. I called the person and asked what happened. She said Diane showed up an hour ago with a tow vendor and said her car was blocking snow removal access. I asked her if her car was in the street. She said it was in her driveway. I asked her if the driveway was plowed. She said it was not, and the tow vendor said he was authorized to remove any vehicle that interfered with emergency services. I asked her if she got paperwork. She said the vendor gave her a claim ticket booklet with no readable text and told her to call the yard in the morning. I told her to take photos of everything and meet me at the board meeting tomorrow. By 7, the snow was 6 inches deep and still coming. I checked the weather and the blizzard was supposed to last until 3 in the morning, which meant the cure deadline would hit in the middle of the storm, and there was no way to clear the walkway until it stopped. I texted Marcus and asked if the city had any emergency orders about snow removal during active storms. He said the city recommended waiting until the storm passed, but HOAs could set their own rules as long as they did not conflict with public safety. I asked him if towing someone during a blizzard was a public safety conflict. He said it was if the tow blocked emergency vehicles, and he would look into it. At 8, Diane posted in the group chat. She said winter safety enforcement was in effect, and all homeowners were required to maintain clear walkways and driveways by 6 a.m. or face immediate fines and emergency removal services. She said the board had authorized Precision Winter Services to provide priority response for non-compliant properties at a rate of $600 per service call, billed directly to the homeowner. She said refusal to pay would result in a lien on the property. I screenshotted the post and added it to my folder. Then I replied and said I would see her at the board meeting. She did not reply. The group chat went quiet. At 9, I got a call from Ed, the contractor. He said Diane told him I was refusing service, and he wanted to give me one more chance to book a priority slot before the morning rush. I asked him how much. He said $800 because of the storm surge. I said that was triple the normal rate. He said normal rates did not apply during emergencies. I asked him if Diane was getting a cut. He hung up. I did not sleep much. The wind kept rattling the windows, and I kept checking the group chat to see if anyone else got towed. 2 more people posted photos of claim ticket booklets, and one person said the tow vendor refused to tell them which board member authorized the removal. I saved everything and added it to the folder. By midnight, the snow stopped and the temperature dropped to 8 degrees. I went outside at 1 in the morning and cleared the walkway with a headlamp and a bag of salt. The ice underneath was thick and stubborn, and the salt was not cutting through. I scraped it with the shovel until my hands were numb, and then I went back inside and waited for dawn. At 6 a.m., Diane knocked on my door. I opened it and she was holding a clipboard and a camera. She said my walkway was still non-compliant, and the fine was now $500. I said I cleared it an hour ago. She said the ice was still visible and that constituted a hazard. I said the salt needed time to work. She said time was up and she was authorizing emergency removal. I asked her who was doing the removal. She said Precision Winter Services, and the bill would be $900 plus the fine. I said I was not paying. She said the lien would be filed this afternoon, and my credit would be flagged. I said I would see her at the meeting tonight. She said there was no meeting tonight because the board canceled it due to the storm. I said the storm was over, and the agenda was posted. She said the agenda was amended and the meeting was rescheduled for next month. I asked her who amended it. She said the board did, in an emergency session this morning. I asked her if she had minutes. She smiled and said the minutes would be posted next week. I looked past her and saw a truck pulling up to the curb. It was a white truck with Precision Winter Services painted on the side, and Ed was driving. He got out and walked up the driveway with a snowblower on wheels. Diane said he was here to correct the violation and I needed to move my car out of the garage. I said my car was not blocking anything. She said the garage door clearance was non-compliant and it needed to be opened during snow removal operations. I said that was not a rule. She said it was now, and Ed needed access to the full driveway width. Ed started the snowblower and the engine roared. He aimed it at the driveway and pushed forward, blowing snow into a pile at the curb. I watched him work for 30 seconds, and then I saw what he was doing. He was not clearing the driveway. He was piling snow across the apron so my car could not get out. I yelled at him to stop. He shut off the blower and looked at Diane. She said to keep going. He turned the blower back on. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Diane saw me and said recording without consent was a violation of the privacy policy. I said we were on my property and I did not need her consent. She said the HOA covenant included a media clause that prohibited defamatory recordings. I said she could take it up with my lawyer. She stepped toward me and said if I did not stop recording, she would call the police for harassment. I said call them, and I kept recording. Ed finished the driveway and shut off the blower. The snow pile was 3 feet high across the apron, and my car was trapped in the garage. Diane handed me an invoice with no readable text and said the service call was $900 plus a $200 obstruction fee. I asked her what obstruction. She said I obstructed the work by standing in the driveway. I said I was standing on my own property. She said the driveway was common area during snow removal operations. I asked her to show me that in the covenant. She said it was in the updated handbook. I did not take the invoice. I went inside and called Marcus. He said he was already on his way into stall until he got there. I went back outside and Diane was labeling the snow pile with her label maker. The label said obstruction hazard with a handwritten date. I took a photo. She said I was harassing her and she was filing a complaint. I said file it, and I took another photo. Marcus pulled up 10 minutes later in his city truck. He got out and walked up to the driveway. Diane saw him, and her face went tight. Marcus looked at the snow pile and then looked at her. He asked her who authorized blocking a garage exit during active snow removal operations. She said the HOA authorized it under winter safety enforcement. He said that was a fire code violation, and the homeowner needed immediate access to the vehicle. She said the homeowner could access the vehicle through the front door. He said the vehicle was in the garage, and the garage door was blocked. She said the obstruction would be cleared once the fee was paid. Marcus pulled out his phone and took photos of the snow pile, the label, and the invoice. Then he looked at Ed and asked him if he had a city permit for commercial snow removal operations on private property. Ed said he did not need one because he was working for the HOA. Marcus said the HOA did not exempt him from permit requirements, and he needed to clear the obstruction immediately or face a citation. Ed looked at Diane. She told him not to move. Marcus said if the snow was not cleared in the next 10 minutes, he would call a city crew and bill the contractor for emergency services. Ed cleared the snow. Diane watched him with her arms crossed and her jaw tight. When he finished, Marcus handed him a citation for unpermitted snow removal and told him to report to the city office by Friday. Ed got in his truck and left. Diane turned to Marcus and said he was overstepping his authority and the board would file a complaint with the city. Marcus said the board could file whatever they wanted, but blocking a garage exit was a fire code violation, and he would cite the HOA if it happened again. Diane did not leave. She stood in the driveway and said I still owed the $900 for the service call. I said I did not authorize the service. She said the HOA authorized it under emergency powers. I asked her to show me the emergency declaration. She said it was filed this morning with the management company. I said I wanted a copy. She said I could request it in writing. I said I was requesting it now. She said now was not a valid request format. Marcus stepped between us and said the service call was invalid because the obstruction was created by the contractor, not the homeowner. Diane said the homeowner obstructed the work by refusing to move the vehicle. Marcus said the vehicle was in the garage, and the garage was private property. Diane said the driveway was common area. Marcus said the driveway was private property under Michigan law, and the HOA did not have authority to seize it. She said the covenant gave the HOA access rights. He said access rights did not include blocking exits. She finally left. I watched her drive away, and then I thanked Marcus. He said I needed to get the evidence in front of the homeowners tonight or Diane would bury it. I said she canceled the meeting. He said the meeting was not canceled. The board just did not post the new notice. He pulled out his phone and showed me an email from the management company. The meeting was still scheduled for 7, but the location was moved to an off-site conference room, and only board members were notified. I asked him how he got the email. He said Angela forwarded it to him an hour ago. I called Angela and asked her if she could get me into the meeting. She said she could, but I needed to bring witnesses, and I needed to move fast because Diane was already telling people the meeting was closed. I called the 6 people from the group chat and told them to meet me at the conference room at 6:45. 5 of them said yes. The 6th one said Diane threatened to fine her if she showed up. I spent the afternoon printing copies of the invoices, the ledger, and the group chat posts. I organized them into a tabbed timeline so anyone could follow the thread from the first enforcement letter to the last payment. I made 12 copies, 1 for each board member and 1 for each homeowner who said they were coming. Then I drove to the conference room early and waited in the parking lot. Angela showed up at 6:30 with 2 other committee members, and Marcus showed up at 6:40 with a folder of city records. The other homeowners showed up in a cluster at 6:45, all of them looking nervous and cold. At 6:55, the board members started arriving. Diane was the last one, and she saw all of us standing in the hallway. Her face went white and then red. She walked up to me and said the meeting was closed to non-board members. I said the bylaws required public meetings unless the board voted to go into executive session, and I did not see a vote. She said the vote happened this morning. I asked her to show me the minutes. She said the minutes were not finalized. I said then the meeting was public, and I was staying. She turned to the management company rep and told him to call security. The rep looked at Marcus, who was holding his city badge, and said he was not calling anyone. Diane said this was private property and she had authority to remove trespassers. The rep said the conference room was rented by the HOA and the bylaws governed access, not Diane. She said she would have him fired. He said she could try. We went into the conference room and sat down. The board president, a man named Keith who looked like he had not slept in a month, called the meeting to order. Diane sat at the front table with her clipboard and her label maker, and she stared at me the whole time. Keith ran through the agenda, skipping public comment and moving straight to winter safety enforcement review. Diane stood up and started her presentation. She said winter enforcement was a success, and the neighborhood was safer because of her work. She said she issued 27 violations in January and collected $14,000 in fines and service fees. She said the board should expand her authority to include pre-storm inspections and mandatory contractor approvals. She said homeowners who refused to comply were a liability risk and should face accelerated lien procedures. Keith asked if there were any questions. I stood up and said I had a question. Diane said public comment was not on the agenda. I said I was not making a comment, I was asking a question, and the bylaws allowed questions during board presentations. Keith looked at the management company rep, who nodded. Keith said I could ask one question. I asked Diane how much money Precision Winter Services paid her in kickbacks. The room went silent. Diane said that was a defamatory accusation, and I would be sued. I said it was a question, and I had documentation. I pulled out the tab timeline and handed copies to the board and the homeowners. Diane tried to grab the papers, but Marcus stepped between us and told her to sit down. I walked through the timeline. I showed the enforcement letters with Ed's name and the contractor recommendation. I showed the invoices with service dates that did not match snow events. I showed the reimbursement ledger with payments to properties that did not exist. I showed the group chat posts where Diane threatened homeowners with liens if they did not hire Ed. I showed the email from the management company denying my public comment request. I showed the tow yard claim ticket booklets from 3 homeowners who were told their cars were blocking snow removal access when they were parked in their own driveways. Then I played the trump card. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the conference room speaker. I said I had a recording from this morning where Diane authorized Ed to block my garage exit and charge me $900 for a service I did not request. I hit play. The recording was clean. Diane's voice came through the speaker saying the driveway was common area during snow removal operations, and I needed to pay the obstruction fee. Ed's voice came through saying he was following HOA orders. My voice came through asking who authorized the orders, and Diane saying the board did in an emergency session with no minutes. I stopped the recording and said I had more. I said Marcus confirmed there was no emergency session this morning and no fire code exemption for blocking garage exits. I said the city was investigating Ed for unpermitted snow removal, and the management company was reviewing the reimbursement account for fraud. I said every homeowner in this room who paid a snow fine in the last 2 months was owed a refund, and every homeowner who was threatened with a lien had grounds for a harassment complaint. Diane stood up and said I was lying and the board would not tolerate this ambush. Keith told her to sit down. She said she would not sit down and she was leaving. Marcus stepped in front of the door and said she was staying until the board voted on the evidence. She said he had no authority to hold her. He said he had authority to detain her for questioning if the board found probable cause of fraud, and the evidence I just presented was probable cause. Keith called for a vote. The board voted 5-1 to suspend Diane pending an external audit. The one vote against was from a board member who was listed on the reimbursement ledger as a recipient of Precision Winter Services payments. Keith called for a second vote to refer the matter to the county prosecutor. The vote was 5-1 again. Diane screamed that the board was betraying her and she would sue every one of them. Keith said the meeting was adjourned and Diane needed to leave the property. Marcus escorted her out. She yelled the whole way to the parking lot, saying she was the only one who kept the neighborhood safe and the board was full of cowards. I watched her drive away, and then I went back inside. The homeowners were still sitting in the conference room, and 3 of them were crying. Angela came up to me and said the board was going to refund every snow fine issued since December and void every lien Diane filed. Keith said the management company was terminating the contract with Precision Winter Services, and the board was voting next week to remove Diane from all roles. I asked Keith what would happen to the reimbursement account. He said the county prosecutor would freeze it pending the audit, and if fraud was confirmed, the board would refund the money to the homeowners and file criminal charges. I asked him what would happen to Ed. He said Ed was facing city citations and possible fraud charges if the prosecutor found evidence of kickbacks. I said I had more evidence if they needed it. He said they did, and he gave me his email. I left the conference room at 9:30 and drove home. The streets were clear, and the temperature was dropping again. I pulled into my driveway and saw that someone had cleared the walkway and salted it. There was a note on the door from a neighbor saying they saw what happened at the meeting and they wanted to help. I brought the note inside and added it to my folder. 2 weeks later, the county prosecutor filed charges against Diane and Ed. The charges included fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit theft by deception. The board held an emergency winter meeting and voted to remove Diane from the board and ban her from all HOA roles permanently. The bogus snow fines were automatically refunded to everyone hit in the enforcement wave, and the management company issued a public apology for failing to catch the fraud earlier. The prosecutor offered Diane a plea deal, but she refused and demanded a trial. The trial was scheduled for April, but the prosecutor said he had enough evidence to convict without my testimony. I said I would testify anyway, because I wanted to make sure the minutes recorded the reversal and the reason. The prosecutor said he would call me as a witness. Ed took a plea deal and agreed to testify against Diane. He said she approached him in November and offered him exclusive snow removal contracts for Willow Ridge if he paid her 20% of every invoice. He said he agreed because he needed the work, and he did not think anyone would notice. He said Diane told him the board was afraid of her and they would not ask questions. He was wrong. The board held an election in March and replaced 3 members who were listed on the reimbursement ledger. Angela ran for board president and won. Her first act was to dissolve the fines and enforcement coordinator role and move all enforcement decisions to a full board vote. Her second act was to hire a new management company that required transparent accounting and monthly audits. Her third act was to amend the covenant to ban emergency sessions without public notice. Diane got a written warning for harassment behavior from the prosecutor as part of the pretrial process, and the judge issued a restraining order preventing her from contacting any Willow Ridge homeowner. She moved out of the neighborhood in March and listed her house for sale. The house sat on the market for 2 months before she dropped the price and took a loss. I stayed. The neighborhood was quieter without Diane, and the new board was careful not to repeat her mistakes. The winter safety rules were rewritten to match city code, and the snow removal contracts were open to competitive bidding with public oversight. No one got towed, no one got fined, and no one got a lien. In April, the prosecutor called me and said Diane took a last-minute plea deal to avoid trial. She pled guilty to fraud and embezzlement and agreed to repay the full amount stolen from the HOA, plus restitution to every homeowner she fined. The judge sentenced her to 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service. She was banned from serving on any HOA board in Michigan for 10 years. I got a check in the mail for $600, the total of the fines Diane issued against me. I framed it and hung it on my wall next to the label she stuck on my snow pile. Every time I walk past it, I remember the look on her face when I played that recording on speaker outside the clubhouse so neighbors could hear it in real time. And I remember the moment the board voted to suspend her while she screamed about betrayal. The neighborhood learned something that winter. You do not shovel to my standard, you pay to my standard does not work when the standard is fraud. The board will back me because they are afraid of me does not work when the board gets a management audit that exposes the pattern. And you are not special. You are just next on the list does not work when the list becomes evidence and the evidence becomes a conviction. I still work nights as a custodian and I still know everyone in town. When people ask me about the HOA, I tell them the story. I tell them about the invoice trail showing kickbacks in the recording that proved Diane was running a scam. I tell them about Marcus and Angela and the homeowners who showed up at the meeting. I tell them about the moment Diane demands proof and then panics when I hand out copies, and the way the room went silent when the truth came out. I tell them the minutes record the reversal and the reason, and Karen gets a written warning for harassment behavior, and the neighborhood is better now because we held the line. I tell them winter in Ann Arbor is still cold, and the snow is still heavy, and the ice is still dangerous, but the rules are fair now, and the enforcement is honest, and no one is getting robbed by the person who is supposed to protect them. Thank you for being here.